Can you guys hear us? Did you miss that whole?
Yes.
You did?
Start. Hello. Welcome to Lifestyle Business. Now with the mic on. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ann, and we're happy to have you all join us on what is the last show of the summer.
Last show and the best show.
Last show and the best show. We have a whole new roster of exciting shows coming up starting on September 15th. But before we get there, we're going to be talking to Dee Marshall, CEO of Diverse and Engaged, and Katim Sherrell, President of Results Driven Consulting. Dee is going to share with us her personal journey, and I know she's going to be inspiring. And Katim is going to talk to us about community building and forging strategic partnerships to address social issues in Newark, New Jersey. I can't say social issues. It's social issues in Newark, New Jersey. It's going to be a Newark show.
Can't wait. Newark members, Newark show.
It's amazing.
Great
we love
focus
Newark
today. Yeah.
Okay, so we were just talking about the show last week. And how many guests do you think we've had since March?
I think we've had 40, 50, I don't know.
Somewhere north of 40.
That's great.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
This is, we started the show, as everyone knows, unprecedented times in a post-COVID world as the world closed. This actually has been our only real connection to our community, which is kind of crazy to imagine. We spend so much time in our communities, in our physical spaces, but this has been our lifeline over the last few months.
Yeah.
And it kind of seems like as the world's been a little bit melting down, this has been a little bit of a lifeline for us. So over the last 5 months, we have witnessed a global pandemic, a human rights crisis on our streets, a healthcare crisis. We spent weeks helping people navigate the path to a PPP loan. Yeah. My head wants to explode thinking about that.
Now we got to pay them back.
And make sense of EIDL.
Yeah.
You know, that loan program where just money would randomly show up in your bank account if you were lucky, but you had no notice, no information, no nothing. And now you have to pay that back. So there was that. No, it's crazy.
It's been, it's been quite a run so far. And obviously we're reflecting back as we wrap up season 2. I don't even know if people know this is season 2. We have the spring season,
summer season.
But hopefully it has kept our members informed. We've heard wonderful reports from people that they've gotten loans, PPP loans, and kept businesses alive because they watch the show. And then all sorts of stuff. What happened during the summer season?
Oh, each week something else has been happening.
Yeah.
Remember, we had Mitch Landrew and Mark Morial on one week after the other, which was pretty awesome, especially considering the fact that they came on and literally this was during the whole time that the Black Lives Matter movement was finally getting its due. And what's great about Mark and Mitch was they came on and basically were like, now it's time to pay attention. Now's the time to talk. And they gave us actually coaching and the audience coaching on how to get involved with your community and not let this opportunity pass us by.
Yeah, it was pretty powerful. Mitch was the mayor who initiated the removal of the Confederate statues in New Orleans. We spoke to him
now across the country
as they were being pulled down in Richmond, Virginia. And I think he was feeling really reflective that day. And then we spoke to Mark Morial, and he had literally just been the night before to Black Lives Matter Plaza. The day after that was painted in front of the White House in DC, and he had walked that, and he came on the show. So it's been fun to have people who are at the center of these movements on kind of in real time here.
Yeah, it's been funny. We've been talking about, we started this with it being a small business resource center. And then what we found was it was much more, right? It was a way for us to connect with people like Dee, who we only get to see when we're in Newark. And it's a chance for us to connect and talk to people and catch up with old friends and colleagues. We've also gone through a lot. So last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the fact that we lost 2 of our locations. And so we had to close down Newark. We had to close down New Orleans and Memphis. And we were able to come on the show, and our friend Frank Gruber was here, and he sort of was there to catch us after our emotional communication around that, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and if anybody's been feeling the ups and downs with us, we've literally been going through that process in real time. So as we are in negotiations with landlords and hearing from members who are hurting and their businesses are hurting, at least for me, Launchpad TV has been the sort of the anchor. The show must go on. We must go live. We must try to get the mic on every week, regardless.
Put the red lipstick on.
Whatever's going on in our lives, and everyone has things going on in their lives right now, both business, personal, family, a lot of different levels that we've been going through with people, and we have been going live even in the midst of
chaos,
chaos in our own business and many members' businesses. Yeah.
So, Chris, why don't you just run us through the highlights, and then we're going to jump into the meat of today.
Okay. Other topics we've covered, very, very topical right now. Had Mayor Tubbs from Stockton on, and Scott Santon's talking about universal basic income, a really important area of focus, something you're hearing about this week with the Democratic convention going on, and the much needed lifeline to members of communities across the country during the pandemic. We had Catherine Lyons on talking about PPP and helping to navigate our process, not just our process, our members. I mean, she was a direct line into Washington, into DC as the bill was being negotiated. Bruce Katz came on, had similar conversation with Mark Morial about reinvigorating our cities with need for generational wealth creation and real job creation, wealth creation, bold action.
And we can't forget Sabrina Short came to share her story.
And that was, the Black Technola conference that we hosted virtually, of course, from the Launchpad New Orleans location. Actually was what we went out on. That was our—
I know, way to go out on a high note.
Last event in New Orleans. Last event for now. I always want to caveat that for now in New Orleans. So wonderful to have her on. I also just want to acknowledge and touch on, we've had several of our guests, both prior to being on and after being on, had COVID. Several of our Launchpad members have lost family members to COVID. This is a real, it's a global health pandemic, and it's touching us, and we're talking to people as it's touching them. So, the importance of keeping everybody healthy and safe during this time, but also acknowledging the hurt that people have been feeling when people are sick and unfortunately have been losing family members, has been tough to deal with and process. So all of that going on within a couple months here.
Yeah, it's also been crazy. I mean, just the juxtaposition of highs and lows, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had Amy on, Amy Dye from New Orleans, talking about her startup and how actually COVID has accelerated the results of what she's been trying to do. And her numbers are great and they look up. And then juxtapose that with her husband's a frontline worker and an emergency room doctor. So she was able to share those stories. And I think it really is about the stories and creating those connections over the time. For me, I think let's move on to our show. But one of the things I'll say is the highlight for the season for me was I got a hand-drawn card. It was beautiful. It was an artist drew it because she is she's an artist, and it was a handwritten note saying that this was her only way of staying connected with anyone right now, and the community. And so she looked at Launchpad TV as a break in her day and as a little bit of an outlet, and I thought that was pretty awesome. So we're doing it just for you. So let's get going. Let's bring Dee on.
Okay.
All right. Joining us now, Dee Marshall holds many titles, making it onto multiple top 25 lists of the who's who. She is an award-winning influencer, a sought-after international speaker, author, certified coach, Wall Street alum, and the CEO of DCMarshall.com brands, a portfolio that includes Yummy Life Coaching, Diverse and Engaged, and Girlfriends Pray. Leaning on her unique life experience, Dee has made her life's mission to empower individuals and guide them on how to achieve their full potential. And she's here to tell us her story and teach us how to get from where we are today to where we're meant to be. Dee, it is so great to see you.
Hey there, gorgeous and greatness. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, it's so good to see you, and it's good to be here. And the red lip wins. You are really, you're wearing that red lip.
Just like you, my friend, just like you.
So it was really inspiring to hear you, Chris and Ann. I mean, like even before we get into this discussion about how the show is really a way to keep going in this time and how that has been meaningful for you. Like the show must go on. And I was thinking to myself, yes, Chris and Ann, because that's what we do as business owners, as entrepreneurs. We keep going. We figure out ways to do things differently and to survive and thrive. So I was just inspired just hearing you.
Oh, thanks, Dee. And I will say the first time I met Dee was at her, what was it? What did it call? It was Rock Win Rule.
Win, Rock, and Rule.
Win, Rock, Rule. That's right. It was so great. And she was up on stage and I was like, it's that energy that we all need, right? And we got to be able to tap deep and to be able to inspire and to be on the edge and try and do it. And sometimes it's harder than others, but Dee, we really appreciate you being part of our community there.
Yeah.
So
thank you for creating it.
Yeah, thank you. So let's jump in. Ariel, our producer, was talking a little bit about your backstory. So why don't you tell us a little bit about A, what you're doing at Diverse and Engaged, because I know that's where your passion is, and B, how did you get here?
Yeah, so interesting.
Or BA, whatever you want.
Yeah, so interesting story. So Diverse and Engage in terms of what it is that we do right now, because it's a fairly new brand. It's really a rebrand, but we speak 3 languages, leadership, workplace culture, and diversity. And our why is, basically we're here to help the world better connect, communicate, and respect unique differences. So that's really the work that we do. And it's good stuff. I will say that in this season, we are we've turned a corner in this, global pandemic. And then there's a pandemic within a pandemic, right? In terms of civil unrest and a global reckoning of racism against Black people in America. We've turned a corner because of our diversity work. So that's what we're doing right now. So we're really starting to see a significant shift in our business just in the last 20, 30 days.
Wow.
But how did I get here is a good question. So I started my career on Wall Street. I worked on Wall Street training $1 million producers. And, I love my job. I was in training and development, but I was one of few. Brown people, Black people on Wall Street, but I absolutely loved my work. I was super, grateful and favored. And I had a lot of great support, even being a Black woman on Wall Street. And, but my defining moment that kind of led me here right now, and Chris, it was September 11th. So I worked on Wall Street on September 11th. Literally at One New York Plaza, I have a story of down 33 flights of stairs. I feel like I've shared this with you, Ann or Chris, in our passing. And it was a defining moment for me. Like, that was a defining moment. I loved working on Wall Street. I loved the company and the work, even though I was one of few. I had great colleagues and coworkers. They were super bad, like some of the baddest white people on the planet. Like, I like to talk about some of the baddest Black people on the planet. They were some of the baddest white people, meaning in a good way. They were sharp. They were great leaders. I remember there was a woman by the name of Suzanne Stack. If anybody knows, she was super bad. There was another guy. His name was Mike. I think his name was Mike Rice. He was in Wharton. He was in his 30s running a Fortune 10 financial services firm, and he was super bad, meaning good. And so I loved working on Wall Street. And then that happened September 11th. And I started running, and I was running 8 hours. I didn't get home to Jersey until about 4:30 on that day. But on September 12th, I woke up and there was questions. And one big question: if I died yesterday, would I have any regrets? And so really it was that question that really led me to make a definitive decision about not wanting to be average and not wanting to take life for granted. And if you think about it, like, that's the season that we're in right now, to be quite honest. So that's really the backstory of that defining moment, which was September 12th.
It's funny. We always look back on these moments of crisis, and it's where we find that nugget of strength, right? And it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean the strength of, getting through it. It's those sort of nuggets of sort of, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And then what purpose? So you're right. We are in that defining moment. This is, by and large, we all often refer to it as like our nation's Hurricane Katrina. Yeah. Our nation's 9/11. Like, everybody is going through this, and it is a crisis, and it's challenging, and resilience, but also it's a chance to rewrite the book.
It is. No, you're absolutely right. Right. And I agree with you 100%. So during the first wave of the pandemic, I knew this is a reset, right? That I described it as the A team and the B team, right? There are the A team, the people who are consumed with the pandemic and tracking numbers. And it's not to say that we're not insensitive if we're not doing that, but we don't need to be in it. Like, we don't need to be, because it doesn't serve us, right? It makes us feel heavy and overwhelmed that people are dying. And I'll be quite honest, I'll say in the Black community in particular, the health disparities, there are greater numbers of Black people in this country losing their lives. And so it's not that I was taking it for granted, but just saying there's an A team who is all consumed, but there is a B team, and they know this is a reset. This is an opportunity. And this is where millions and billions are made. People are solving problems right now because we have issues and we have challenges and problems right now during the pandemic. And so there are people who are going to birth businesses. They're going to pivot their business. They're going to swivel. They're going to do something different. And baby, they're going to come up out of this and really with a harvest for generations to come. And so that was the first, the pandemic. And then it took on another life. Once, God rest his soul, Mr. George Floyd lost his life, and Ms. Breonna Taylor and Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, just a whole nother crises within.
That's right.
So, So Dee, sort of, reflecting on those two crises and sort of happening simultaneously in a lot of ways. Where do you think the country is, and are we, obviously we're approaching sort of a political season, but even beyond politics, have we gotten to a point where the work that you do with the importance of diversity and inclusion initiatives and is the business community finally ready to listen and ready to take real action, not just sort of, lip service. Yes, it's important, but we're focused on meeting our quota, meeting our numbers, meeting our quarterly reports. Are we ready for a real change in this country at this point?
Yeah, I think definitely ready. And if not, a lot of people are going to lose and suffer huge if, particularly businesses, if they are not paying attention to the current climate. Yes. So yes. And to your question, are businesses ready? And I think absolutely. And out of necessity. And because there's such we call it high reputational risk. Businesses have high reputational risk right now as it pertains to diversity and inclusion and race relations. And so the reason I think a lot of businesses are doing the work because there are people, good people, who really want to be part of the change, right? And I'll just talk in really black and white terms to not dance around it. So there are allies, white allies and white CEOs right now in the last 30, 60 days issuing statements. We are against white supremacy and racism. They are anti-racism messages and Black Lives Matter. And some of that may be lip service, but there are lots of organizations, corporations who are now beginning to do the work, like doing work and not just writing checks. So I believe, yes, there are great people and good people doing great work right now, deciding to be on the right side of history. And so yes, it's yes and no. And then there are some who may not be there yet, but here's where I would say it's a risky game for CEOs to not pay attention and to do real work. It's risky because we live in a highly social digital world. And so there will be consumers who are likely to call businesses on the carpet, or there will be employees to say, I don't feel, I don't feel comfortable. There's no representation. And so that's why I say it's a risky game for businesses to not invest in diversifying their organization and paying attention to who their consumers are, because somebody is going to call them out. It's either going to be Congress, right? We have the 116th Congress. It's the largest and most diverse. You've got LGBTQ representation. You've got Muslim representation now. You've got lots of people of color, and so there's accountability there. Or you're just going to go to your nearest social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and somebody somewhere is going to say, hey, company, who are your consumers? And your consumers and your workforce are not singing up. So I hope that answers the question and it sheds some light on, for businesses, kind of where things are and where we need to be. All of us need to diversify. Look, I'm having to diversify my company. Because why, Chris? And because our clients are Fortunes, the Fortune 500. You know what they're saying? They're saying, we're celebrating 30 and 50 years of supplier diversity. How diverse is your company? That's what they're saying. So for a moment, we were not diverse. We were all women and we're all Black women. Okay. But if Fortune 10 company now calls us for D&I training, race relations, right? We have to be able to diversify. And so to speak to everybody at the corporation. So I hope this is helpful. I hope it's helpful, Chris and Ann, and it makes sense now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the diversity and inclusion has so often been a buzzword that corporations do and programs, right? But doesn't actually change when you think about the ranks. And you and I have had this conversation around the importance of who are your suppliers, who are your executives, who are all of the people that you work with, and how does that reflect how you're making decisions. And when I think about company culture, so often they'll be like, we're going to focus on investing in culture. We're not even talking about diversity and inclusion. We'll just invest in culture. And they're like, let's get a coffee bar and some snacks, because that's what culture is. And you're like, no, actually, it's how you make decisions. Yeah. It's how you reflect on leadership. It's how you actually organize your company for your employees and how they have a voice in the decisions that you make as an organization, right? And so at the end of the day, I feel like right now, whether it's because it's the zeitgeist of the moment or whatever, but people are actually having to make concrete change. Yeah. And then once they've made concrete change, the reality is there's no going back, because we really do are very exposed from a strategic business perspective if you don't have diversity of opinions, right? If you are literally a board full of white investor male individuals, you can't define a worse scenario for actually understanding a customer base, a company base, the youth of the future, where we're actually going to go, all of these things. So I feel like, Dee, what your work is so important, because it's not just about, it's making sure that we live the values of diversity and inclusion and then see the benefits of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you said a couple things really powerful. Even for small businesses, and it's like the handwriting is on the wall. First of all, there's a lot of D&I indexes right now who are tracking businesses. And so that's one, right? They're looking at how diverse, they're looking at internal staff, executive positions, vendors, board, and so on and so forth. And so you can pay attention to the handwriting. Like Goldman, when Goldman Sachs says, listen, we're no longer going to take companies public if the board is not diverse, right? So you're starting to see where there is change and shift. And so first it starts out as gender diversity, and then race and ethnicity. In California last year, or I think it was 2018, there was a bill passed that, corporations can no longer have boards without women. And so these are examples of what's coming and how it will increase, it being a company and a country who is really starting to shift in terms of embracing diversity and inclusion. And again, I'll go back to consumers they are, when I say woke and conscious, consumers will go to your website, and they're if you're on a panel and you're a business owner, somebody somewhere is going to ask a question, and they're going to go right in. Why? Because that's Gen Y, and that's what they do. They are, listen, they would say, we are not our ancestors. We will call you out. They will say that. And we will. And so anyway, so it's just a lot of handwriting on the wall in terms of embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now we're in the season of race relations. So, so this is a rich conversation, and I really appreciate you all inviting me to this.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you, Dee. And let me just share a quick story to exactly your point. You're talking about consumers calling you out. There's a board that I sat on where one of the things that we did was a hangout, like a Zoom call with the employees, and in one of with the board. And in one of the meetings, an employee brought up, "Hey, can you guys explain to me why every board member in our company is a white male?" That we had to answer live. And so it's not just your consumers; your employees are demanding it as well. Your team. It's really critical.
Yeah.
People are holding ourselves, the companies we work for, to those types of standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
The funny part about that board story is then all the board members were like, "Oh God, tough question that requires more than numbers. Chris, could you answer it for us?"
Yeah. But you know what? Alex Ohanan, I think that's his last name, Reddit's founder, he gave up his board seat. And so I think it's things like that, just paying attention. And I think, it's good to see his experience. It's good to hear your experience, Chris, because I think there's no shame and no shade that this is yes, it's an all white board. There's the shame and shade comes in. Okay, but do something about it, right? It's just, let's not have that conversation again. And we've seen that play out with tech CEO being called to testify before Congress. It's like they called him once, they had the conversation about diversity, and they called them back, conversation about diversity. Now listen, dude, just get it together so that if they call you back again, you can have something to say. So we'll get there together, Chris. But I like that you could co-sign that that's really happening. Last thing I shared. So I was at an event, and a C-suite executive from South by, he was on a panel and he got a similar question. And it was just awkward and uncomfortable. And so after, I just went up to him after on the sidebar. I'm like, dude, I can help you with this. Like, let's talk about it. Like, let's just fix your situation. And he's like, yeah, let's chat. Because again, I think it creates an opportunity. Like, yeah, let's figure out what do we do about this? Like let's fix it. So.
All right, well, good. Well, Dee, one of the things that we're going to be doing on Launchpad TV in the next season is going to be including new shows in addition to this lifestyle business show. And I'm hoping you'll maybe come back on. We'll talk to you about maybe doing a workshop or, a deeper dive into exactly what, the consulting that you do and exactly what we're discussing now about, helping to increase the diversity of companies. I know you're working with companies all over the world, and it's a really important area of focus right now.
Yeah. No, sure. Absolutely. I'd love to support in any way that I can. And I appreciate the opportunity. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. We'll say goodbye and hopefully see you soon, either virtually or at some point back in Newark again.
Yeah.
But stay safe, stay well, and it was great to have you with us today, Dee.
Same here, and virtually everywhere online. I am at DC Marshall. I play the most on Instagram. I do business the most on LinkedIn, or certainly diverseandengage.com is where we do real work. So thank you.
That's great, Dee. Thanks so much. And now, Katina Scherer-El is the president of Results Driven Consulting. For the past 10 years, he's been working with nonprofit, government, and philanthropic organizations to develop and implement strategies in the areas of education and community development. He's here to talk to us about bringing unusual partners to the table in an effort to facilitate shared action in and around his hometown and our favorite Launchpad location, Newark, New Jersey. How you doing?
And I need to take you everywhere I go. I just love that introduction. So if you could just follow me around, like when I go into my mom's house, if you could just bring me out like that, it'd be great.
It's like having theme music. It's great. Yeah.
Chris is like, I wish she would do it for me once in a while, or just once.
I have to say, Chris, for Launchpad Newark, I don't know if you remember, before you opened up, I was actually coming by to see a tour of the space before I signed on my deal. And having that conversation with you was just all the confirmation that I needed that it was going to be the space for me. So thank you for being a brand ambassador and creating such an incredible space here in Newark.
That's so great. Thank you, Katim. That means a lot. We actually had Dio, we spent some time with her last week, and we were sort of telling stories about some of those early days at Launchpad Newark and just the community that formed and reflecting on that. And it was just, we try to just set the table for it. It's really the community, the Newark community that builds the community and creates the community. And you were part of that. And she was such an important piece of that. And we're really excited to have her back in our organization.
Did you hear she's back?
I did. I'm super excited. I love Dio.
I know. Talk about a coup.
Yeah.
Wooing her back. I played the long game. She left me. I was like, I'm going to get you back.
And I think that's one of the magic sort of pieces to the whole Launchpad story is just the dynamism in the people who are sharing office space together. Dee Marshall, my goodness, I could have sat here and listened to her for a whole another 30 minutes. And just to know right across the hall from me is just another one of those great things about Launchpad.
Yeah.
Well, Katim, you are all about community and engagement, and obviously that's something near and dear to our house and our hearts. I would love to hear from you a little bit about what you're doing with results-driven consulting, and kind of, how do you spark the magic, and how are you going to keep it going? How can people keep it going in a time when we're not physically together?
Yeah, so I'm a small business person like others who are likely tuning in. And like others, we get into this because, we want to make a profit for ourselves, have something for our families, and hopefully generationally have something to sort of pass down to our kids. But we also have sort of that part of this work where we ask ourselves, like, how are we making a difference? And I've been at this for 20 years. You look at me and you say I can't be a day over 20. So
you're so young.
yeah,
So young and handsome.
But I've been at this for 20 years, and I tell you, nothing brings me greater joy than to be able to do this work in my own backyard, my own hometown. For Results Driven, our work really runs the gamut. I mean, we've done everything from working with nonprofits to develop strategic plans to facilitating these big, messy groups, helping them sort of figure out ways to work together to really address complex issues like crime, closing the academic achievement gap, talking about issues like trauma. And at the end of the day, I think one of the things that I bring to the table, and to answer your question, Anne, is always get stuck in sort of thinking about the business case for why my work should and could make a difference in the community, because they can't see the pathway, they can't see the possibility. And I think that's one of the things that I sort of bring to the table is the ability to hold an idea. So you have a business and you sell widgets. Well, what if you ever talk to young people about the supply chain or the production side of sort of creating those widgets, just to think about sort of, what you might be able to inspire in a young person, in somebody who's thinking about getting into the business and now seeing you do it. Like every walk of the way on the for-profit side, we have a chance to make a big difference on the not-for-profit side. And I think that's what I enjoy doing with my clients, is really helping them take their aspirations, their sort of bold, audacious goals, and translate it into an actionable plan that can actually, make a difference for those around them.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, so often we hear about business leaders who are sort of, visionaries and, are able to see the future. And often in sort of the day-to-day, you get so heads down and sort of focused that, just having that sounding board, almost that, coach and consultant that sort of lets you, see, okay, this is the path. If you have this laid out in front of you, here's where you can end up. Here's how you can inspire generations. Here's how you can open up opportunities for people. It sounds like that's sort of, that's what you're able to help people with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will give you just a quick example, just coming back from, doing a lot of COVID-19 relief work. As you can imagine, the coronavirus, hit us all and has continued to be something that we are trying to manage through. But when it first happened, I have to say it was one of the most beautiful times in this work for me, because all the old stuff went out the door, right? So in the nonprofit arena, we have these competitive grants that pits nonprofit organizations against each other. We have scarce resources, so people don't feel like there's enough to do to be able to sort of serve their organization's mission. And then we've got all of this negative self-talk, right? Well, we can't do that, or we tried to do this before and it's not possible. And I think COVID was able to sort of break through all of that and get everybody to drop their guards. In Newark, I'm working in one of the highest need neighborhoods. I think arguably it's certainly high on crime, high on poverty, hard hit by COVID-19. The mayor, in fact, designated this area as one of the hotspots early on in the coronavirus and issued a quarantine mandate and basically told everybody, don't leave your house unless it's an emergency situation. But then, the beauty of how folks came together, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people began to ask questions. Well, what are people going to do to put food on the table? Like, how are they going to make that work if they can't work, right? Mm-hmm. If they don't have the means to sort of go out and sort of, get food for themselves. And so a group of organizations listening to residents, right? Not organizations that serve community and serve residents, but really listening to residents, came together and established these block level pantries where we literally recruited, people to run food pantries out of their house. We supplied them the food, they leveraged their relationships, got their neighbors together, and we were able to serve 300 households for the last 3 months. And the beauty of that story is, yes, we were able to supply folks basic needs, but it was all that behind the scenes stuff, right? One, we said it was possible, right? People believed that we had to come together to help folks. Two, we let go of all those turf issues that would have had us sort of fighting about who's going to be in charge, who's going to get credit. And three, at the end of the day, as I said before, we got out of this mindset of serving the community and really started listening to the community. Because if it was up to me, quote unquote, serving the community, I probably would have established one central location because it's just easier to do supply and demand. You can sort of inventory and get things out the door. But residents in the community said, you got to bring this to the blocks. And not only do you have to bring it to the sort of literal street where people live, it's got to be led by somebody that folks on that block trust. Because in the moment of real fear, all we have is our relationships with our neighbors and the trust to be able to lean on each other. And I just think that, as you were saying, Chris, in terms of how to help us move from just kind of doing our day-to-day humdrum of running our businesses to imagining our role in like really making a difference in community, like that's the stuff. Those are all the pieces that get me excited about this work.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting when something hits you, you know, like the old, everybody has a plan till you get hit in the face, that Mike Tyson, you know, punched in the face. That's sort of what happened to us. And there's some dynamics that, you know, organizations, and you mentioned nonprofits, you know, sort of, you know, are sometimes dealing with, you know, it's not just administrative, but sometimes it feels administrative. You're sort of caught up in, you know, funding applications, keeping our own organization alive, keeping our mouths, you know, keeping our employees fed, and, you know, and the business becomes the running of the business rather than, you know, what the mission of the business and mission of the organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, sort of what we got into this in the first place for. And this time has really, you know, given us a reset of, hey, let's focus on our customers. Let's focus on the constituency that we serve. Let's listen to them. I think that's a really good point about, you know, listening to them. I think one of the, you know, we actually heard that ourselves. One of the points of feedback we were sort of reflecting earlier in the show, you heard us reflecting about Launchpad TV. And one of the direct points of feedback we got was, hey, you guys early on were really focused on PPP loans and things that Launchpad members needed. Some of the shows, it feels like you're sort of in an area where, how is this relevant to Launchpad members? That was good feedback. Like we want to be focused on our constituents, our members. You know, that's sort of the why we're doing this. You know, we're trying to touch and reach, you know, our own members, and this is the way to do it during this time. So it's being able to, you know, listen to your community, your constituency, your neighborhood, you know, during a time like this is really critical.
Well, I also think there's something to be said for, it's great if you can have a singular vision, but in a lot of cases, the needs of the community are diverse, right? And constantly changing. And constantly changing. And actually, it was interesting because I was thinking about, you know, you work with philanthropic organizations, and one of the challenges with philanthropic organizations tend to be they don't move oftentimes very quickly. And they require a lot of social capital and sort of traditional proof points, right? Like I think of it almost like, you know, I mean, talk about vestiges of old. And so how do you make those, or how do you help inspire those organizations to move quickly towards where the ball is going, and not sort of react after the game's been lost? You know what I mean? So what's one of the skills or one of the things that you do on that side?
That's a really good question. And I think, you know, certainly the foundations and corporate charitable organizations have answered that question in Newark. I mean, it was exciting to see that shortly after the pandemic settled in, you know, you got notices going out to grantees saying, forget about that grant report. Forget about the budget that we had for that particular project. The dollars that we've provided are now flexible for you to use to address whatever your organization and your constituency's immediate needs are. And so we bemoan sort of this idea of a new normal, right? We're like all freaking out, like, how am I going to adjust to this new normal? But in some ways, this new normal has created new pathways for us to think about things in new light. And certainly, the way that philanthropy works is one of them. I look to our philanthropic partners like the Victoria Foundation here in Newark, Prudential, and others. As I said before, they got flexible in their grant making, but they also started streeting additional resources. And gone was the sort of 20-page, grant application. It was no. Help me understand the need. Help me understand who you're working with, because you can't do this by yourself, right? To solve this issue. And what do you expect to be the outcomes? And we saw those COVID-19 dollars come through. And I would argue they made a big difference. But going back to something you said, Anne, I hope that wasn't just a flash pan, right? A moment in time. That instead there's some real reflection to say, these are some practices that we need to incorporate in our go forward plan in terms of how we fund and support nonprofit organizations. Right before I got started, I was looking at so I've been working on my set, and clearly I have a lighting issue that I still have to contend with, but progress.
Here, you just need to get this.
The ring, yes.
You forgot to put it on, but it's definitely, it makes you look a lot younger. I mean, not that you need that, but I
don't want to come across as like some, a video blogger, just, too into myself. So I've been like resistant. I've liked the gritty nature.
You need the ring.
I need the ring. Okay.
You can't. I always used to say, you don't want the message to be missed because people can't see you saying it. Yeah. I mean, I used to say it about PowerPoint presentations when people wouldn't align their boxes probably, and they're like, why does it really matter if the data is so good? If people are looking at your misaligned boxes, they're not looking at your data. But the ring's a reco. Strong reco on that.
I will take that. So I pulled some books off my bookshelf just to share with other entrepreneurs and business owners out there who are thinking about their role in sort of this social mission work, this social innovation space. And so one that really sort of stood out for me was Start With Why.
I love that one.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are familiar with it. And you can't get any simpler than the title and understanding what it's about. And it's really, asking yourselves, like, why am I doing what I'm doing and to what end? And let that sort of be the inspiration and motivation that keeps you going. The other book that I thought was of note, especially during these times where we are socially distant, but we're still, connected in so many ways, if not more connected because of technology. And the fact that you can't do this work without managing through people.
Nice.
And so, Dale Carnegie is a management guru. He has a lot of tips and lessons here. But again, implicit in the title is that you can't do this work by yourself. And as a former boss used to tell me, you got to be able to dance with who's in the gym, and you got to figure it out, right? Because you just can't do it by yourself. And then lastly, like we've been saying, which has actually become one of my favorites, is BAM! Do the work.
Yeah.
I get caught up in like overthinking and sort of, dealing with all the self-doubt and the negative self-talk that sort of has us stalled in position. Like, press the gas and go. See what you can get. If you hit a bump, slow down, rev back up. If you have to stop at a stop sign, stop. But at the end of the day, do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work. Doesn't it always come down to doing the work?
I think those are great. Those are great recommendations, and we'll put those after the show. We'll put those sort of in the comments below them. But those are great recommendations.
It's like you knew I was going on summer holiday.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you need a little reading material. But it is so true that this time. For us, and I think for a lot of people, as much as it's been a time of crisis and upheaval. It's also been a tremendous time of reflection and thinking about your why, thinking about why we're doing this, how we're coming together as a team, as a community, who our team is, all sorts of changes over the last few months. Something that I'll sort of paraphrase here, but sometimes change takes so long, and you're sort of caught on this treadmill of day to day. The grant application, the 20-page grant application, or those types of things that sometimes sort of feels like busy work, or feels like strategic analysis, or lots of PowerPoint presentations figuring out what we're going to do. And this has been a time of action, right? The urgency, the way you meet the moment at a time like this is to act, to get that, the food pantry set up in the neighborhoods. We don't have time to plan that out for 2 years from now. That's got to happen. So the people who have been the helpers and the doers during this time is really important.
Yeah, and there's a chorus of folks in Newark. I mean, we were just doing weekly households of about 300, but the city just announced that across the board, organizations, individuals, just really came together and were able to serve more than 2 million meals to Newark residents since this pandemic started. And so, behind that is just an incredible story of people coming together, and I hope that's something we can continue.
That's amazing. That's great. Okay.
All right.
All
Wow.
right.
Thank you so much. As always, we are always so inspired by our Newark members. Newark is where you find everyone in moving and shaking.
Yeah.
So next time you guys are in town, a drink's on me on Halsey.
Oh my God,
Right.
we cannot wait to get back.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm dreading any time flying. I'm not gonna lie, but Newark is our destination of choice, and you'll be seeing Dio soon because she is able to fly, so she's gonna be making her way to Newark pretty soon.
I can't wait. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, it
We'll
was
let you go.
super fun.
Thanks so much, Katim. Good to see you.
So Ariel is going to be getting all of the books that were recommended by Katim, which is awesome. I need to get some of those for me to read. And this was a great show with Dee and Katim, and we can't wait to come back on September 15th. I believe our first guests are the Good Stock Gals in Stockton.
All right, so we'll be shifting to Stockton when we come back. We hope everybody has a great end of the summer, great back to school for any of you parents out there who are sending anybody back to school. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I don't know. I don't know if you want them to go back to school or you don't want them to go. It just seems like I'm very happy to have a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Well, thanks to Ariel, the whole Launchpad team. We couldn't do this without you. You've been with us through thick and thin here over the last two seasons.
Forced to watch.
All our viewers who make this a special thing for us every week and have been with us through the ups and downs. It is nice hearing from you when you have the feedback that we touched your day somehow, and it's been great being with you over these last few months.
It sure has.
Yeah.
We know who's on whose team, that's for sure.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon, folks. So long, and see you next season.